Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Chaos behind the scenes as the 11 Formula 1 teams prepare for the behind closed doors test in Barcelona, which is coming up very shortly, and so shortly for some of these teams they might not even make it on time. Rumours that potentially 3 teams, certainly multiple, might well be arriving late to the Barcelona test, including a suspected top team as well, and some are saying, could this be Ferrari, with some more rumours emerging today that their programme is somewhat behind the curve. Is it over already? Not necessarily, for the reasons we'll get into, but very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Thanks for all the support. Sorry for no video yesterday, but we're back in it today because there's a lot going on. So, McLaren, they have both their drivers signed for the next couple of years. Will that stay true? I think there's questions on Piastri, but every other team, what happens next year will be very relevant to what their driver looks like going forward, their driver lineup looks like. That is also definitely true at Aston Martin, right? When Alonso decides to call it a day, whether Lance Stroll stays forever, who knows? The rumour is, though, starting with Aston Martin, they will be 15 kilograms, roughly, over the weight limit. Now, I don't think that's actually that bad. It's quite a lot. It is the same amount, roughly, as the 2022 Red Bull was over the limit. By the time they got that under control, kind of halfway through the season, they were in a different stratosphere to most other cars and teams at that point. Adrian Newey is aware, his mind is set on the 5th or 6th race. The focus of the first major upgrade package will be that weight reduction. All the teams are going to struggle with this. The engine now is heavier than it previously was, but yet the weight limit, the minimum weight limit, has been reduced quite significantly by about 30 kilograms. But there's more stringent crash testing and safety features. As I say, the engine is now heavier, so reducing effectively 60 kilograms of car weight is not easy to do, especially with all the complexity of this new generation. It's not something that they're going to be able to do when the season starts. Maybe the teams that have way more aero and development testing time, they could give this a good go, but even then I think that given the weight kind of dilemma is a different conversation, it's very difficult to imagine. So look, Aston are probably going to start with about 0.5 a lap just to be gained in terms of weight. I would be surprised if other teams aren't in a similar position as well. Now, there is a big question on how good Aston Martin are going to be, because they're certainly a team to watch, but I think there seems to be a conversation to be had between either they're going to be an absolute threat, dark horse, maybe the championship is on the table, but the smart money seems to be that they're probably going to take a step forward, but it's not going to be anything drastic. Lance Stroll even said, we don't have all the tools. We know that Adrian Newey has talked about the lack of simulator data that they have, the driver in the loop tools not being quite good enough, that type of stuff. But yeah, it would come as a little bit of a surprise given this is their facility in Silverstone. It's quite radical, really. It's massive. If you guys have been there to Silverstone and driven past it, you'll kind of even just feel the scale of the operation that Aston Martin have got going on. They're taking over the whole of Oxfordshire. But yeah, whether that will translate on track is a good question. But let's talk about this, because Audi, they hit the track the other day. We talked about it a couple of days ago. They have a car that is already ready here on, what was it, the 9th or whatever of January, a couple of days back. But the other cars, apparently, that is less true for. So what are we going to expect? Because the later the teams prepare the package and the car, the more advanced it will be, naturally. So it's understandable you might want to push it back somewhat and probably only bring the serious stuff for the second Bahrain test and then for the first round in Melbourne. Zach Brown believes that McLaren, the best is yet to come. I mean, it's kind of difficult to go much better than winning both championships, but look, we'll see if Zach Brown is right about that. McLaren, though, they didn't compromise, which is true. Their 26 development, we know that Red Bull did, at least to a certain extent. They put a lot into upgrades in the latter half of the season. McLaren gave up relatively early on their 25 car, and they just about got away with it in the drivers anyway at the end of the season. But it does mean that they should be well positioned. But again, Mercedes would be considered to have an advantage given all the integration advantages you get as the works manufacturer team. James Vowles even says, Of course, former top strategy guy at Mercedes. Now he's been running the show at Williams for a couple of years. So while they, as in Mercedes, have been preparing pretty much just by ironing out the regulations and getting it right, what I've been doing is laying more of a groundwork on top of trying to focus some time on the 26 car. Basically, the important part is, so what you can read into that is what I know where Mercedes will rank. And they will be, I am sure, very strong. Now, of course, there's a reason why Williams did the deal with Mercedes. They're expecting a strong relationship there, and James Vowles is being very gung-ho publicly on what he's expecting out of that Mercedes power unit and probably their car in general. Laurent Marquis from Red Bull taking a different approach. They know they made some sacrifices to let Max give it a go in 25. He now says it would be naive to think that we are going to arrive straight at the top. We know that a few very, very difficult months await us. Lots of sleepless nights, a few headaches, but that's part of the privilege of being associated with this kind of challenge. So, look, is that a statement that Christian Horner would have given? Possibly not. Maybe Marquis just naturally is more realistic or pragmatic or pessimistic maybe than Horner. But Horner did himself say, with regards to the engine project, it would be an embarrassment if Red Bull were to be ahead of Mercedes at the start of this upcoming season. So even Horner didn't seem super gung-ho. And Marquis says that we know that a few very, very difficult months await us is a pretty damning assessment of where Red Bull expect to be. Now, I guess that should be really difficult with respect to where they would like to be. You know, maybe Max is fighting for fourth or for third rather than for wins. That would be very, very difficult, I think, in Max's eyes anyway. But I think it could be, and quite possibly will be, a lot worse than that. Who knows? What's also going to be difficult for Red Bull is to keep hold of Max if this is a reality. Because, like, if Max is suffering a few very, very difficult months, and there's sleepless nights and headaches and all this stuff, you think he's not going to be on the phone to Lawrence Stroll or to Toto Wolff? I guess we'll see about that. But Ferrari, the key talking point of the day. Fred Vasseur says he wants them to go under the radar, and maybe what is under the radar is not turning up at all, which is what we might be talking about here with Barcelona in a second. This year is so critical for Ferrari, honestly, top to bottom, right? Let's say a team like Mercedes, if it doesn't go to plan, obviously it is a big deal, but Antonelli isn't going anywhere, George Russell isn't going anywhere, let's be honest, and probably Toto Wolff isn't going anywhere either, unless he wants to sack himself and step into a different role. But most teams, at least of those kind of contenders, you would expect some of those people to stay. At Ferrari, if it doesn't go to plan, possibly everyone goes in the very near future. Now, Hamilton, how he gets on with these cars, that's going to be important, of course, for him to get closer, try to beat Leclerc, especially if this year might have an opportunity to win, however doubtful that might currently feel. Of course, he also will have had some contribution to the SF26, which is this year's challenger. Whether Ferrari really listened to Hamilton's documents he submitted, that'll be a different question. But it's also critical for Vasseur. We know that he was put under pressure. I remember that Montreal Grand Prix this year when I was out there in Canada, and all these rumours were emerging that John Elkann and Ferrari, they were going to sack Vasseur, get somebody else in instead. And the timing of that was so bad because they literally dropped that report right before media day. So then Leclerc and Vasseur and Hamilton had to speak to the press about it, and they gave Vasseur their unanimous support. Eventually, Ferrari have backed Vasseur and kept him on longer. But that won't be the case for too much longer if next year doesn't go to plan. Probably the most interesting piece of this is Charles Leclerc, right? He's been with Ferrari for such a long time. He's always wanted to make it work in red. This is the year that will make or break that. Leclerc has apparently even said, he has said this in various interviews, certainly hinted at it, but it's becoming increasingly clear behind the scenes that if this year's Ferrari isn't good, that will seal the deal and the relationship will end, the decade-long partnership will go, and he will look for greener pastures. And I may mean that rather literally, depending on which team he might join in the near future. But the other Ferrari story is how prepared they really are. As Dekesa points out, are they being aggressive or are they just late to the party? Some sources suggest a chaotic situation. The seat fit has already been carried out, but the fire up hasn't, but it is coming imminently. So it's all a little bit confusing, this, and I'll leave the entire article linked down below, but this is probably the most compelling piece of the article. Some auto racer sources suggest the final build of the new car suffered an unspecified delay, partly due to some sudden changes prior to assembly that required further testing. This means the first chassis has only just been approved, while the drivers have already undergone the seat fitting process, which replaces the old foam casting process. Pretty interesting, they do like a 3D scan one now. So, very fascinating this. Now, is this good or bad? Ferrari, as a result of this, appear to be behind the curve. Could it be bad in the sense that they were ready with a chassis to run and prepare for, and then they discovered a problem? I mean, either they discovered a massive problem that needed resolving, because they could have just sent it and brought that change as an upgrade, you would think, but maybe it was so critical that it needed doing for the core version, or possibly it wasn't a fundamental flaw, it was more that, okay, we found a new version that's better, we can just about fit this in and make it happen, so let's do it. That means that our package that we get to present is a little bit more aggressive than others might be, but also gives us a bit more learning, gives other teams a bit more learning too, potentially as well. But the rumour has it is a bit chaotic, and their car has been delayed somewhat. But, you know, you could read this another way, because you could read this and say, well, the chassis has been approved, the drivers have done the seat fitting, what's there to worry about, right? Okay, the car hasn't been fired up yet, but presumably that'll all be okay. He goes on to say a couple of interesting things, especially about the state of the regulations right now. But there is a feeling, not just from this, because this is why he describes it as chaotic, just because so many grey areas, so much going on, so many potential loopholes that may or may not have been found. You know, maybe there's something like that, right? Ferrari realised, oh, we missed something here, and we've got to go back and resolve it now, otherwise we're really going to be on the back foot. That's a possibility. Of course, that doesn't bode well. I mean, when they've made a last-minute unspecified change to the chassis that's causing some delays, it's doubtful that can be a good thing, I wouldn't imagine, but it might not be the end of the world. What is, however, very interesting is whether Ferrari or other teams won't be making it to the first test in Barcelona. So just to break it down, less than a couple of weeks from now, we go testing in Barcelona. I think it actually is 2 weeks today, isn't it? The 26th of January. We turn up to Barcelona to go testing. There's a 5-day window between the 26th and the 30th of January. The teams are allowed to run their car on 3 of those 5 days. So you don't have to run on Monday if you don't want. You can go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I think the reason, though, they've done this is because of the weather. You go to Barcelona in January, if you go to Bahrain and whenever, you can pretty well predict what the weather's going to be there for testing. But in Barcelona, you don't necessarily know. The idea would be you go there on set up for Monday. If the weather's good, you run. If it's not, you don't. You see what the forecast looks like. That would be my expectation. But that's not necessarily what is happening here, because there was another report from the Italian press, this time from Motorsport Italia, that says on the 26th of January, not all teams will be there. That is the current rumour. A few might arrive after day one. Now, this could just be tactical, as in the weather's going to be fine, we'll turn up on day 2, day 3, we'll get ready for the Wednesday. Gives us a couple of extra days to prepare some more parts, to get things ready, and then we'll be fine. Still do 3 days of testing just like everybody else. But it's possible that somebody might actually miss it, because we know that some teams are falling behind the curve. Even Aston Martin have been talked about in this context, potentially behind the curve. So it might not be Ferrari we're talking about here. It might be Aston. There were some rumours, as I say, that Aston Martin were, just because like Newey's arrival and Enrico Cardile's arrival are a bit delayed, getting the actual chassis prepared has been a longer process than some expected. But would it be a surprise if, given the complexity of these cars and the fact that there are 11 teams to turn up, that some of them might not make it in time? I think it's absolutely possible. I mean, the idea that they just miss the test and then they only turn up to Bahrain, that would be remarkable, but maybe not entirely impossible, because most teams will be using the Barcelona test just for reliability, checking the engine works, checking the systems work. Some teams might feel like, well, if we can put an extra couple of weeks into preparing just for Bahrain, and maybe we show up with some sort of car to Barcelona ideally, I think I would be doing it though, because Barcelona is a different circuit to Bahrain, and it's, I think, a more representative circuit in general. The Catalonia track has all sorts of corners, chicanes, high speed, low speed. You've got, obviously, some difficult traction zones, long straights, all sorts of mix of corners on that track, and you tend to see you can't make too many compromises there. It's a good track to get some experience running on, I would imagine. So this is the talking point, but apparently there could be a couple of teams that don't make it. And, well, as gone on to say in the article here, others will have flexible work plans, but it's possible that some will decide to arrive after others have already begun testing. Some teams have set timelines to delay the approval of certain solutions as much as possible, even by an extra couple of days, just to gather more data and arrive as late as possible. But as I say, the weather should be a factor, you would think, here. And there's also those who are dramatically behind schedule and will not show up on the first day because their car was unable to run due to the lack of some parts being finished on time. Some are whispering that a couple of teams might be late. There might even be a top team. Now, they say it's nothing scandalous, right? It's not going to affect the start of the season in Melbourne. But this is a big deal, right? I mean, we're talking about 2 teams, maybe 3 could be late, including a top team. I'm not expecting that to be Mercedes, right? So, and okay, what is a top team? Well, you have a few options there. It's Mercedes, it's McLaren, Ferrari and Red Bull. Maybe Aston Martin, could you consider them a top team? Obviously not on recent performance like last season, but some expectations they should be pretty good. So maybe they could be considered. But maybe they're not considering them here, right? And I don't think it's going to be Mercedes. I doubt it's going to be McLaren, very much so. So then it leaves Red Bull. But Lauren McKee seems to imply that, yeah, they have problems, but nothing to that extent. So just interesting timing, right? We're hearing Ferrari, some delays, some chaos behind the scenes, and now we're hearing that some teams are going to be late to the sessions because they're not ready on time, parts aren't prepared in time. There might be a top team among them. Is it going to be radical for the season? Well, there's plenty of testing, right? You got Barcelona, then 2 back-to-back, 3-day stint in Bahrain. Maybe you just go there, you focus on that, it's fine. It's behind closed doors anyway in Barcelona, but surely the extra running can only be valuable, especially if teams are going to start finding themselves in reliability trouble. You really want to try and dial out those issues in Barcelona if you can. Ferrari, we think, are bringing Spec A, Spec B, Spec B+, during those different testing sessions. So maybe they'll still have something ready to go and can just test the active aero in the engine, but you don't want to turn up to Bahrain and waste your whole test on engine trouble if you probably could have done that in Barcelona but missed it because you weren't on the ball enough. So that's the concern. Intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Just one final thing though, if you are a Ferrari fan, nothing to worry about. Since 1950, the start of the Formula 1 World Championship, there's only been one red moon or blood moon on March the 3rd, which occurred in 2007, and that year Ferrari won the driver's title, of course, with Kimi Räikkönen. There's a red moon coming on the 3rd of March, so basically you get a total lunar eclipse when the shadow of the Earth is blocking the sun's view of the moon. And then effectively, due to the same reasons, the sunset is red due to the atmosphere gathering up all the blue light. The moon goes red. You might have seen it before. Anyway, that's happening on the 3rd of March, so get ready for that. It's been a big talking point in the news over the last couple of days, and it might be relevant to Ferrari as well, although, let's be honest, probably not. So if everyone's enjoyed your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.